3. The Insurgents. It took the better part of the night before they left Mata City behind them. Karis's ship was docked in one of the smaller harbors only a half-mile or so from the house. It was a small skiff, with a triangle-shaped sail at the very front of the prow, looking like the half-extended wing of some kind of seabird. Made in the traditional design of Cooper sails, Karis had owned this boat for the better part of his life. He loved talking about his boat, explaining when he'd got it, how it had been made, how the triangle sail and light hull allowed her to slip through the water with very little wind. If only I had stayed with him. Jarrus's throat tightened, but the thought was a futile one. They loaded up the few supplies Maya had wisely remembered to pack. After all, there was no telling how long the journey would really be, and Jarrus navigated the boat through the canals that led out to the open water. The network of canals would have been dizzying to unfamiliar eyes, but Jarrus had lived here his whole life, and had spent most of that time in or around the water. The houses they passed were dark, quiet. Everyone was still asleep. In a little while, Jarrus knew, the fishermen would be up, preparing to begin a day's work on the water. The faint light of dawn shone in the east. By the time they reached the bay, the sky blushed pink with the coming dawn. The crescent moon shape of the cliffs surrounded them, like a protective barrier between the city and the thundering sea. Jarrus could see the distant towers of Castle Mata, overlooking the sea like a watchman. Maya sat near the rail, watching the water. She was very quiet, and Jarrus knew there was an additional pain for her to bear. He wasn't sure what to say, or if there was anything he could say to help at all. There were no words to heal the pain of Hagar's betrayal. He felt a brief hope surface as he realized that Maya Raintail was no longer engaged. Immediately, he felt guilty for feeling that. That was a selfish thing to think, considering that while Maya had been upset about her arranged marriage, she had still accepted it. He shook the thoughts away. "We're almost out of the bay," he commented, unnecessarily. Anyone could see the line of white foam that marked the edge of the reef and the gateway to the open ocean. "Hang on, this might be a little bumpy." Maya nodded and edged away from the rail as Jarrus adjusted the sail slightly. "Did your father teach you to sail?" she asked. "Yes, I guess. I actually haven't ever done this by myself," Jarrus admitted. He'd sailed before, yes, 100 times. But that had always been with his father or some other fisherman. He realized that wasn't a very reassuring thing to say, especially when Maya was counting on him to get them to Gayrile. "I mean, I know how to do it. I've done it before. Just not alone," he stammered quickly. Maya smiled faintly. "Well, thanks for being honest. You know more than I do." She sounded a little disappointed in herself. "Didn't your father ever let you sail?" Jarrus asked, a little surprised. Mr. Raintail had a number of elegant little sailboats. It seemed he might have let his only daughter have one. But Maya shook her head with another smile. "No way. It's not very proper." She mimicked a snooty, simpering voice as she said this, and both of them laughed. They crested over the reef with a grinding bump that made Maya wince and look at him in alarm. "Did it break the hull?" "No, we just bumped over the rocks. The grinding was the rocks, not us," Jarrus said. He adjusted the sail again. There was a strong easterly breeze that caught them almost immediately. That would carry them towards the Northern Isles. "I've read about sailing," Maya said. "I like knowing how things are made. The Cooper design of ships is actually a better design than a lot of others. The triangle sail helps move you into the wind, right? What do you call that?" "Tacking," Jarrus said. "And it doesn't really let you sail straight into the wind. You move in a diagonal pattern instead of a straight line." "The Coopers came up with that idea first. The only other species that uses that kind of design is the Genna tribes in the east," Maya said. Jarrus looked at her, surprised. "Really? I didn't know that." Maya looked a little embarrassed. Well, like I said, I like knowing how things are built and who made them. I know it's strange." "Not really," Jarrus said quickly. He was surprised, though. Maya didn't strike him as a bookworm. The next few hours passed in silence. As they continued sailing north, Jarrus could see the landmass of Gayrile slowly becoming more distinct. The spiked ridge of the mountains, on the southeast part of the island, stood out against the gray sky. As they sailed into the harbor, Jarrus could see the buildings of the city coming into focus through the haze of fog. "No more canals," Maya murmured, half to herself. Bridgeport, capital of Gayryle, was built quite different than the city Jarris had grown up in. The buildings were made of brick or slabs of stone, with flat roofs and slightly crooked chimneys. Smoke hung in a haze over the town, mixing with the mist from the sea. A strong scent filled the air, much stronger than the briny smell of the coast. Oil, Jarris guessed, seeing dense black smoke rising in dark columns from the shops nearest to the harbor. Bridgeport is a whaling town. They hunt whales out in the water and bring in the oil. Seems cruel, Maya said, frowning slightly. They have to keep warm somehow, Jarris pointed out, shrugging slightly. He knew the winters in this part of the world were some of the harshest. Towards the center of the island, the climate was warm and dry, with the rain and storms blocked by the mountains. He guided the ship into the harbor. The harbor master stood there, a burly man with a pipe gripped between his teeth. He squinted up at them as the ship glided to a stop beside the pier. Jarris nodded to Maya, and they climbed out. The harbor master stopped them, glancing back at the ship. "Hold up there, you. 3 pennies to dock here, and I'll need to know where you're from and why you're here." His voice was rough, the accent coarse as he addressed them in the Kunsian tongue. Jarris looked up at him blankly. We'll just be here for a little while. There's a lot of available places in the harbor to dock." "Ain't about open spots, mainlander. It's policy." The man sounded annoyed. Maya slipped back aboard their boat, returned with the packs, and produced the required fee. "Here you are, then. We don't want to cause any trouble." The man took the coins, then looked at the Coopers. "And your whereabouts?" "We're from Mata City," Jarris told him. "We're just here on a visit." That was technically true, although tracking down a kidnapper could hardly be considered a pleasant visit. The harbor master grunted, writing a few things down in a little book, then nodded to them. "Very well. Off you go, then." "I didn't know they made us pay to dock," Jarris couldn't resist grumbling as they walked towards town. "It's different here," Maya said, glancing around. "This isn't like Mata City, and the people here will probably be a bit rougher, too, so we probably shouldn't start out by complaining about their policies." She said the last part with a smile, and Jarris nodded, knowing she was right. They approached the town. Crowds moved through the muddy streets. A few filthy children chased a ball. The sights, smells, and noise overwhelmed Jarris for a moment. "What now?" Maya asked, looking uncertain. Jarris thought for a moment. Most likely, the men that had taken the Coopers would have come through this way. Maybe someone had seen where they had gone. "We'll ask around, I guess," he said out loud. "Maybe someone knows where they could have seen them." They followed a group of fishermen across the street, then stopped in front of the market. The buzz of conversation around them was a mixture of the various tribal tongues of the people of Gayryle. But the vendors set up by booths and tables along the road advertised their wares in Kunsian, their voices rising over the crowd with the familiar language. Jarris stopped in front of a jewelry booth. A short woman with tanned skin and turquoise bangles noticed them and moved over. "Hello, can I help you find anything?" "No, thank you. We're just looking around," Jarris said with a smile. "We're looking for someone here. Have you been here long?" The woman grinned and nodded. "I've been here all morning. Seen all sorts of interesting characters come through. Who are you looking for?" "A group of men, soldiers, and 3 Coopers with them," Jarris said, wishing he could provide a more accurate description. There weren't many Coopers here, though, so maybe that would be enough. The woman thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm afraid not. The cobbler's been here longer than me, though. Maybe ask him." She nodded across the road to another tent. "Thanks," Maya said as Jarris turned away. She jogged up to him. "Jarris, there's a lot of people here. Are you sure someone would have seen them?" Jarris hesitated, glancing back at the woman. "I don't know. If they came this way, someone would have noticed, though." He approached the cobbler, an old man who was completely bald and smoking a pipe as he stitched 2 slips of leather. "Excuse us, sir. We're looking for some friends of ours." The cobbler looked up blearily. Jarris continued. "Have you seen a group of soldiers with 3 Coopers with them? The Coopers are from Mata City." That was probably an unnecessary detail, but the more information he could provide, the better. The old man's eyes were distant, half closed, and Jarris wasn't sure if he had been heard. "Excuse us, sir," he started again, louder. "We're looking for someone called Saphicon," Maya said, with the same volume. "We think he kidnapped our fathers." It was as though someone had flipped a switch. The noise of the market was silenced, and Jarris felt all eyes on them. He looked up at the old cobbler in confusion. The old man was looking at something behind them, fear filling his eyes. "Jarris," Maya whispered. Jarrus turned and bumped into the legs of a very tall man in armor. "Is there a problem here, cobbler?" the soldier barked at the old man, not even looking at the Coopers. "No, sir, no, sir," the cobbler wheezed, hunkering back into his tent. "Good," the soldier said. 4 other soldiers stood behind him, smirking, enjoying the cobbler's fear. Jarrus looked at them in confusion. His eyes rested on the symbol on the armor, a bright blue star, rimmed in black. It was the same as the emblem the soldiers who had taken his father had worn. The soldier looked down at them, pretending to notice them for the first time. "Oi, Cooper, is there a problem here?" "No, sir," Jarrus replied. The fur along his spine prickled in uneasiness. "What were you just saying, then?" the soldier pressed, squatting down so that they were eye to eye. Jarrus didn't like what he saw in the man's eyes. They were cold and cruel, and glittered with the satisfaction of frightening others. "We were just shopping," Maya said quickly. "We just got here." "Really?" the soldier asked sarcastically. "Well, welcome to Bridgeport, the lovely smoke pit of Saphicon's great empire." He gripped Maya's neck so fast she didn't even have time to flinch, holding her there with a cold smile. "You told an interesting story, pretty thing," he purred. "Let her go!" Jarrus shouted, bounding forward. Another soldier grabbed his tail and hauled him back. "A very interesting story," the lead soldier continued, still smiling wickedly at Maya. Maya's face was drawn with both fear and anger. "Something about our great Lord Saphicon. What was it? Kidnapping people? Maybe you ask too many questions. I'm afraid we don't tolerate liars here, no matter how interesting they are." "Don't call me a liar," Maya said, but her voice trembled. "Let her go!" Jarrus shouted again, squirming in the second soldier's grip. Boots pounded on the cobblestones behind them. He heard someone shouting up the road. "Captain! Hostiles in the next shop over! They're coming this way!" The captain looked up sharply, letting go of Maya. "The insurgents?" "10 or so of them, Captain," the messenger continued, as Jarrus squirmed to see. "They're burning the oil!" He was cut off. There was a sudden whooshing noise, and a plume of fire burst through the window of the building behind him. Jarrus was dropped to the ground. He looked up in disbelief at the roiling flames. The soldiers were completely caught off guard. The captain bellowed orders at them, swearing profusely at his startled and panicked men. "After them! Now! They can't go far!" Jarrus got to his feet, watching as the soldiers disappeared down the road toward the source of the commotion. Maya grabbed his arm, drawing him back into reality. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine. Are you?" Maya nodded and looked back at the burning building. Vendors nearest to it were quickly packing up their wares in tents and fleeing the fire. But no tents had been set up directly in front of the building, in the path of the fire. In fact, aside from 4 or 5 vendors who had set up near the jewelry cellar, that side of the square was vacant. This had been planned. A group of raggedly dressed men appeared from the opposite end of the road. Jarrus recognized them as the fishermen they had followed earlier. As they passed, he caught the distinctive smell of burnt whale blubber on their clothes. "Hey, wait," Jarrus called after them, intrigued. None of the fishermen stopped. Instead, they moved straight to the tailor's booth, removed their ash-stained cloaks, and replaced them with new ones. Jarrus watched as the tailor hid the dirty cloaks in a trunk. "Do you think they?" Maya trailed off, leaving the question hanging unanswered in the air. Jarrus stared at the group for a few moments, hesitating. These insurgents, as the captain had called them, didn't seem to be a danger to the market folk. But if they had started the fire, why? Curiosity got the better of him, and he moved forward. "Come on," he whispered to Maya, and they approached the fire starters. Several of them were already gone, fading into the crowd. One stood outside the tailor's booth, silently scrubbing at a black streak on his arm. He had removed his hood, allowing the light to shine on his face. He looked to be not quite 20, Jarrus guessed, with blue eyes like the sea on a summer day. His hair was dark, tousled, and messily cut, as if he had done it himself. The hair around his lips and chin was sparse, like he was still trying to grow it out. He looked up as the Coopers approached, glancing between the two of them innocently. "Hello. Can I help you? I don't work here. You'll have to ask the tailor if he has anything that will fit you." We're not looking for clothes," Jarrus stammered quickly. "Who are you?" Maya asked at the same time, her voice lowered. "We saw what just happened. Are you one of the insurgents?" Maybe the captain was right. Maybe you do ask too many questions. the stranger mused, without looking at them. Right. Well, last I checked, nearly all of Bridgeport's income comes from the whalers. So why burn the oil? Seems like a simple question, Maya returned. A very slow smile spread over the stranger's face. Keep your voice down, he said absently, pulling his coat sleeve down over the ash stain on his arm. He slipped inside the tailor's booth, out of sight of the road. You just arrived here, I'm guessing? Your accents are mainlander. We're from Mata City, Jarrus said, hesitating slightly. We're looking for this Lord Saphicon, or whatever you call him. Well, I'd call him a tyrant, but don't tell anyone I said that. Except for Lamar, maybe, but you can tell him anything. He grinned. Why are you after Saphicon? Let's say he took something we want back. Do you know who and where he is? Jarrus asked. Please, Maya added softly. The stranger stood and stretched. I'd know where he is, but you won't be able to get there alone. Definitely not by yourselves. I might know someone who can help you get there, though. You do? Jarrus said, feeling a surge of hope. I said I might. Follow me. He paused and looked back. Sorry, never answered your first question, did I? My name is Rigel. I'm Maya Raintail, and this is Jarrus Puddlepaw, Maya said, nodding to Jarrus. Why did you burn the oil? Jarrus asked curiously, going back to the previous question. Rigel's eyes scanned the marketplace for a moment before he ventured out on the road, confident there were no soldiers watching. Then he turned to look at them. Come with me. Some things aren't safe to discuss out in the open. 4. The Wizard. Rigel led them through Bridgeport, slipping through back roads and alleyways on his way out of town. It was clear he knew how to get around without being seen. Although, considering he had just assisted in the destruction of a large profit of oil, Jarrus wasn't too surprised. He was fascinated by the way the day had unfolded. This young man seemed willing to help them find their fathers. Maybe he'd be willing to help get them back, too. They left the town behind them and headed up a hill, through a scant, shabby forest full of trees weathered by the coastal wind. The road dwindled into a thin gravel path that wound steadily up. The trees cleared out. A small cabin sat overlooking the cliff, sheltered by the trees. Smoke rose from the chimney. Jarrus stopped, suddenly unsure. It didn't matter if Rigel wasn't with Saphicon. He was still a stranger, and thus potentially dangerous. Rigel noticed their hesitation. It's all right. You'll be safe here, he reassured them, and opened the door. Inside, the scent of wood smoke and old books greeted them. The warmth was welcoming after the cold and rain, and despite his uncertainty, Jarrus hurried inside and shut the door. The two of them stood uncertainly behind Rigel, looking around the small house. An older man appeared through a door on the other side of the room. His hair and beard were roughly cut, and his clothes were slightly damp and carried the scent of the sea. He shook his head at Rigel, not noticing the Coopers. A fire in the marketplace. That is what Mr. Kellis told me just a little while ago, Rigel. Burning the oil will only make our enemies angrier, and it will make life harder for many people here. Burning the whaler's oil? Rigel stammered, trying, too late, to look innocent. Unfortunately, he had already taken off his wet coat. The other man had seen the black ash on his arm, and arched an eyebrow sardonically. Forgive me. I suppose the oil just spontaneously ignited, then. He smiled wryly as Rigel sighed and shook his head in defeat, then noticed the Coopers and raised both eyebrows in surprise. I see you brought company. Yes, they're from Mata City. Jarrus and Maya, meet Norin, my mentor, Rigel said. The old man smiled and greeted the Coopers in turn. Norin, Jarrus judged, looked to be in his mid-60s, although it was hard to tell with the twinkling smile in his brown eyes as he greeted them. His hair and beard were still peppered with dark brown, although much of the color had faded to gray. His face was lined and tanned from years of work at sea. There was something familiar about his name, but Jarrus couldn't place it. Good to meet you both, Norin said. And what brings you to Bridgeport? Well, it's a long story, Maya said, looking at Jarrus. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, hesitation to trust these men. But Jarrus knew they had to take the chance. He could tell, somehow, that Norin and Rigel could answer the many questions in his mind. Both of our fathers were taken from Mata City last night, Jarrus explained, and Maya's fiancé. Thinking of Hagar brought that hot, angry feeling back to his chest, and he quickly left the topic behind. "We think they were taken to Gairal. The soldiers that took them had the same insignia as the ones here in the market." "We think they were taken to someone called Saphicon," Maya said. A look crossed Norin's face that Jarrus didn't understand. Uncertainty, sorrow, and a strange resolve. "Saphicon," he said finally, almost to himself. "So he's finally turned his sights south again. I suppose he's finally searched for it in all of Gairal." "Search for what?" Maya asked, her brow furrowed. The men that took my father, they said something about searching for an object, too. And when my father didn't have it, they took him anyway." "But what does this Saphicon want with Coopers?" Jarrus asked, studying Norin's face. Now the old man looked at him, his expression thoughtful. His eyes held the same emotion Jarrus had seen earlier, the uncertainty, the resolve. There was something in that look that somehow chilled him. Out of everyone else here, he knew Norin knew exactly what Saphicon had in mind. This man had seen things that none of them could even imagine. "They were taken by Saphicon?" Norin asked finally, for confirmation. "Well, that's what we figured," Jarrus stammered. "They didn't steal anything at all. They were looking for something they thought Maya's father had. Then they took him, so they wouldn't have any witnesses." Rigel looked at Norin. Do you think he's looking for—" He trailed off uncertainly. "I would assume as much," Norin said, straightening and moving to the fire. "Then this is the perfect time, Norin. We have to fight," Rigel said. "We can't let them do it on their own. You know what Saphicon is capable of." "Yes, I do," Norin said quietly. "Quite better than any of you here." He put a log of wood to the fire, then turned back to the Coopers. "Very well. Come, sit, and I will tell you what is going on. Would anyone like tea?" Jarrus hadn't eaten all afternoon. He and Maya gratefully accepted some bread and 2 mugs of tea and sat on the sofa. The mugs were bigger than the ones Jarrus was used to, made for human hands. But the tea was warm and soothing after the excitement of the past 18 hours. Norin sat in the chair by the fire, and Rigel sat across from him. There was a moment of silence as everyone settled down. Jarrus was trying to remember where he had heard Norin's name before, but he couldn't place it. Then Maya spoke quietly. "They were looking for you, too," she said. Her voice was very soft, fearful, as she looked at Norin. "The men who took my father. They wanted information about someone called Norin." To Jarrus's surprise, a faint smile appeared on the old man's face. "Did they? That's not too surprising. They've been looking for me for years." He chuckled and took a sip of tea. "They have?" Maya said, confused. "Why?" Jarrus asked. Norin set down his mug. "Well, that's a bit of a long story. To understand it all, we must start at the very beginning, with the Guardians of Gairal." The fire crackled. The room grew tense with anticipation of the story. "Almost 20 years ago now," Norin began, "after the fall of the cruel Queen Kirkadash and her war, both Kunsia and Gairal were struggling. Kunsia, naturally, had the Lisnis to help. The Isle of Gairal was smaller, distant, and so the Guardians of Gairal were established. Our mission was to help the Commonwealth and keep peace and order. Over the next few years, we helped the people of Gairal to prosper and grow, protected them from danger. And that is when Saphicon made his move. Saphicon, you must understand, had been in Gairal before any of this began. He grew up here, and when the Guardians of Gairal were established, he joined us for a little while. I knew him, briefly, when he was young and learning the study of the ancient arts. He was ambitious, cunning, and smart." Norin looked at the fire. "I even trained him in a few things, in strategy and battle play." "You knew Saphicon?" Jarrus repeated, stunned. This man, he was beginning to realize, was no mere fisherman. "I did," Norin said with a slight smile. "He was a popular public figure with the people. He was an alchemist, a diplomat, a friendly face. He was the type of person you would trust and follow without question, and that is exactly what people did here." His smile had faded. "Saphicon promised security, prosperity, wealth, everything the common folk wanted in those days. Eventually, he took over as the ruling voice in Gairal, even surpassing the king of the Dairan people in power. He disbanded the Guardians of Geyral the moment he could, and when we resisted, he used force."
"So he's a lord now?" Maya asked slowly. "But if he was able to take control, then why doesn't the High King Jean do anything about it? Geyral is under Kunsia's leadership, right?"
"Yes, but Safakon is no mere politician. And here we get to the dark part of the story," Norin said. "To all outward appearances, Safakon is now the ruling lord of Geyral. His soldiers enforce his laws, and his citizens follow his commands. But Safakon is more than that. I mentioned his love for alchemy and the magic arts before. That is the heart of his power. In the years before the Guardians of Geyral, Safakon studied in the ancient arts of sorcery. At the height of his strength, Safakon created a weapon of great power, a jewel, forged from the core source of a fallen star. Safakon also made 2 sister objects from the jewel, a ring and a knife. With the knife of destruction, one would become the greatest warrior in the world and eliminate your enemies with a single word. With the ring of light, one could control night and day, and in a sense, the very flow of time itself." He paused.
"And the jewel?" Jairus asked slowly.
The room had grown very quiet. "It is the most powerful of the 3, Norin said. "The jewel controls the other 2 and gives them their powers. Safakon learned much about its powers while building his kingdom, and he used it against the Guardians of Geyral when we resisted his rule." His face was gray.
Jairus looked at him, sensing the gravity of the subject. He had heard a little about Safakon, but most of it had been rumors only, or facts with no explanation behind them. But he had never even heard of the dark magic Norin spoke of now. "What happened next?" Maya asked softly.
Norin looked up at her. "When Safakon took control of the Commonwealth of Geyral, the Guardians resisted. He defeated us in open battle with the power of the objects. Many Guardians were lost, and Safakon placed great bounties on the heads of the survivors, especially mine."
"Norin led the resistance for a while," Rigel jumped in, excitement in his eyes as he spoke. "My father, Marin, fought too. They devised a plan to stop Safakon once and for all." "You did?" Jairus said, impressed.
Norin nodded slowly. "The jewel, the knife, and the ring, they were our targets. Without them, Safakon would fall. He needed them to complete his conquest of the world, so we devised a plan to steal them."
"There are a few breeds of dragons that still live in the mountains near Safakon's fortress," Rigel told them. "Some of them have been domesticated by Safakon. My father managed to steal 3 of them, so that the group could fly right over the guards without them suspecting anything."
"Yes, he did," Norin said, smiling fondly at the memory of his friend. "Well, our group got past the guards without any trouble. Marin, myself, and a young prince of the Brownie people. The Brownie, Deathcap, he guided us to Safakon's palace. What we did not know was that desire for the jewel and the power it brought had already filled Deathcap's heart. The moment we were inside, he betrayed us."
"Did he get the jewel?" Maya asked, wide-eyed.
"No, Marin prevented that, thank the light. Deathcap did manage to steal the knife, though its destructive powers pale in comparison to the jewel's. Marin took the jewel, and I the ring. It was not easy. Safakon's guards had been alerted, and they pursued us, their archers firing after us. We managed to reach the dragons and took to the sky." He paused before continuing. "Marin was struck by an arrow as we escaped. He fell with the jewel into the wilderness."
Jairus glanced up at Rigel. His face was gray. "I'm sorry," Jairus said softly. Rigel shrugged very slightly, as if trying to shake off the pain of the loss. "He died fighting against Safakon. I don't remember him much." Maya looked at Norin. "So, the jewel was lost, and the knife was stolen. What about the ring?"
"The ring, yes, and that brings us back to Deathcap," Norin said, nodding. "Though he had the knife, he was desperate to get the other objects as well, the jewel in particular. I meant to deliver the ring to King Makana of the Dyrans, as he alone may have some idea of how to defeat Safakon. But Deathcap intercepted me on my way, near the Whitewash River. We fought, and the ring was lost into the river. The last I saw of Deathcap, he had retreated to his fortress in the Wandering Wood, where he no doubt still plots my demise."
There was a brief pause. Jarrus looked at Norrin. "Then how does this explain why Saphacon took our fathers?" he asked slowly. "Why kidnap Coopers?"
"Saphacon has been searching for the jewel for nearly 2 decades, Norrin said. "In fact, that was part of the conquest of Cato, almost 7 years ago. Cato was sent to the mainland, along with an army of immortal warriors, to undermine the Lisney's authority. That led to his defeat, as I am sure you have heard." He shared a brief smile with Rigel before continuing. "By now, Saphacon must have concluded that the jewel is not on Gayrile. Thus, he has turned his sights south. He has actually taken mainlanders many times before, but he does it carefully and quietly, to avoid any outcry."
"Saphacon's going after any wealthy civilians," Rigel explained. "From what you've told me, Maya, your family is quite well off. Saphacon may suspect that your father used the jewel to make himself rich." "But wouldn't Saphacon know that the jewel is on Gayrile?" Maya said slowly, still confused. "Norrin, you said Marin fell with the jewel into the wilderness of Gayrile. Couldn't Saphacon simply track where he fell?"
"He has already tried, as have I," Norrin said wearily. "But it is nearly impossible to guess where exactly the jewel fell. The Wandering Wood is a vast expanse of forest that covers nearly half of the island. Beyond that, the jewel itself is a devious and peculiar thing. Whether it has an intelligence of its own I have yet to learn, but I do assume that if it chose to remain hidden, even from its former ally, it could and would do so." The thought was baffling to Jarrus, so he moved on for now, returning to his more pressing question.
"Okay, so he kidnapped Mr. Raintail because he thought he had the jewel, he took Hagar because Hagar knew too much, and he took my father so there wouldn't be any witnesses. Well, how will we get them back?"
"That is the question, but I'm not quite sure I have an answer yet," Norrin said hesitantly.
Rigel looked at him, the light rekindling in his eyes. "Norrin, you mentioned before that Saphacon could be stopped, that we could fight him. If we rallied the Guardians of Gayrile again, stirred up the resistance—"
"As proud as I am of you and your resistance efforts, Rigel, you know as well as I that Saphacon's army would stop them," Norrin said gently. "And the Guardians are all in hiding. I could try to contact them, but we would still be outnumbered by the Servantiri."
"We're better fighters than the Servantiri, no matter the numbers," Rigel said confidently, folding his arms over his chest. "Servantiri?" Jarrus repeated, glancing at Norrin. "What are the Servantiri?"
Norrin turned to him. "The Jewel of Power can do many things, Jarrus. Saphacon created his fortress, his empire, and much of his strength with the jewel. It's a temporary power, all of it, and will die when the jewel is destroyed, but it is quite effective. The Servantiri are a host of created soldiers, brought into being by Saphacon. They obey his bidding without question, and are difficult to kill."
"Not impossible," Rigel said, then admitted, "but difficult. And Saphacon has tons of them. He can't create any more of them now, not without the jewel, but they are still a force to be reckoned with, and they search for the jewel even now." A sorcerer with great power, protected by an army of artificial beings, in a strong fortress, and he had their fathers. Jarrus was beginning to feel overwhelmed. Even the Guardians of Gayrile, who had been the best warriors in the north, had been no match for Saphacon. "What if we found the jewel?" Maya asked slowly. "If we found the jewel, the ring, and the knife, we could trade them for our fathers' freedom." "But then Saphacon would win," Rigel said immediately. "But we could fight him," Maya said, though she sounded doubtful. "No, you don't understand," Rigel said, shaking his head. "If Saphacon had the objects again, especially the jewel, all he'd have to do is say the words, and we'd all drop dead before we ever had a chance. Present threats, future threats, he could see them all. He'd kill us all, us and anyone else who might challenge his rule."
"We cannot give the objects back," Norrin agreed. "They must be destroyed, broken upon the golden tablet that they were created on. Only then will Saphacon be defeated."
He paused. Firelight played over his features, and Jarrus could almost see the thoughts turning in his head. "You think we could find the objects and destroy them before Saphacon does?" Jarrus guessed finally. They were all looking at Norrin now. The old man nodded slowly.
"It is the only way. The resistance can fight as much as they want, Burn as much oil as they want, but ultimately it will only fuel the fire of Sapphicon's anger. The only way we can truly stop him is to find the jewel."
"And then we fight," Rigel said, his eyes fierce and eager. "We'll free their fathers, and all of Geyral with them." The words lit a spark of hope and excitement in Jairus. They would fight. They would defeat Sapphicon and save Geyral from his tyrannical rule once and for all. "How?" Maya asked softly, looking uncertain. "I mean, I know that's what has to be done. After everything you've told us, I understand that now. But we can't fight all of the Servantiri."
"Ideally, we won't have to, alone," Norin said. But a smile crossed his face as a thought occurred to him. "All the same, I know of another who will gladly join us."
5. The Siren's Song. Rain fell through the night, pattering against the windows in a rhythm that lulled Jairus asleep. Norin had offered the spare bedroom to the Coopers. The human bed was too tall and soft for comfort, so Jairus gladly accepted the bedroll and blanket instead, allowing Maya to have the room to herself. The story Norin had told them formed strange dreams in his mind, but he slept fitfully. He woke to someone shaking him awake. "Morning, Jairus. It's time to go." Rigel's voice came dimly from above him. Jairus opened his eyes, squinting at the light. "Huh?" he mumbled, mind foggy with sleep. "What time is it?" "Time to get on the trail," said Rigel. He was grinning and looked wide awake. "More rain's coming again today. There's a big storm to the south. We leave too late, and we'll get soaked." Jairus sat up slowly and began grooming through his fur. Rigel moved to the other side of the room to wake up Maya. The embers of last night's fire still smoldered, and the warmth made Jairus feel sleepy again. He shook his head to clear it. Norin stood by the door, packing supplies into leather packs. He smiled as he saw Jairus. "Good morning. Roll up that mat and blanket as tight as you can, and put it in the bag. Rigel can help you." "Here," Rigel said, as Jairus glanced uncertainly at the mat. He rolled it up tightly, slid the roll into a small bag, and helped Jairus situate it over his shoulder blades. "You'll carry your own gear. We have the food and water in the other packs, though." "You've done this before," Jairus remarked with a slight grin. Rigel shrugged as he helped Maya with her bedroll. "Trail packing. Pack as light as you can, but pack what you need." It was drizzling rain as the four of them walked the streets of Bridgeport, towards the dark mass of wilderness on the other side of town. Norin led the way, avoiding the main roads. Jairus noticed several soldiers patrolling the streets, and guessed that with the excitement of the fire yesterday, more troops would likely be out keeping watch. "Are those Servantiri?" he asked Rigel softly as they passed a group of soldiers. One of them eyed them carefully, but thankfully didn't recognize Norin or Rigel with their cloaks and simple clothes. "No," Rigel replied in the same lowered tone. "Those are living people, men who joined Sapphicon. Whether they joined by choice or were forced to, I'm not sure, but there's a large number of them, unfortunately." It was hard to picture people willingly joining Sapphicon, Jairus thought, but he knew it happened. He frowned as they passed the harbor, remembering something. "Oh, crud. The boat. My father's boat. It's the one we brought here. What should I do with it now?" Rigel looked at the harbor, looking unconcerned. "It'll be there when we get back. They won't charge you anything for keeping it there longer." Jairus looked at him, dumbfounded. The idea of leaving his father's boat unattended was absurd in his Cooper mind. This must be another thing he had to learn about human ways. "You're telling me I can just leave it there? Pops will kill me," he muttered as an afterthought. "As a fellow fisherman, Jairus," Norin said, "I trust the harbor master. Your father's boat will be kept safe for as long as we take to return." It was very looked down on in Mata City for someone to leave their boat unattended for that long, but there wasn't much Jairus could do about it. Apparently it was normal here. "Where are we going?" Maya asked as they left the township behind. "West," Norin replied, "towards the swamps." "I should warn you." Rigel stopped abruptly. "Warn us of what?" Jairus asked. "Well, our friend, the one we're going to see, he's a little eccentric, that's all," Rigel said, looking slightly abashed. "Just don't be alarmed." It was mid-morning before they left civilization behind and reached the place Norin had mentioned. The pine groves that had made up much of the coastal forest were replaced by drooping willows and large clumps of sage. The ground grew more and more soggy until the gravel road was replaced by a wood boardwalk.
the planks of which were covered in moss. The mangroves grew denser in around them, until the terrain became a universal green-gray. Below the boardwalk, the slow-flowing river was thick and soupy. Jarrus debated swimming at first, but could now see that most of the river was mud. Branches stuck out of it at odd angles, giving the area a spindly and starved look. Rigel sidestepped a rotten board and continued walking. "The path is in much better condition than the last time I was here, at any rate," he commented. "We're nearly there." "Do you trust this person, Norin?" Maya asked as they followed Rigel. "Indeed I do," Norin said. "He is, as Rigel said, a little peculiar, but I would trust him with my life, and I have faith that he will join our cause against Savicon." "Here we are," Rigel said from up ahead, and Jarrus's attention was drawn back to their surroundings. The east bank of the river sloped up slightly. A thatch-roof hut crouched in the mangroves, the walls made mostly of mud. If Rigel hadn't pointed it out, Jarrus guessed he would have walked right by it. Large round windows were set high in the walls, giving it the appearance of a large frog. Rigel stepped carefully from the boardwalk to the bank, his foot sliding back into the mud before he had his balance. "Come on, then." The two Coopers followed. There was no door, only a tattered curtain that covered the entrance. Since the whole swamp was hot and muggy, Jarrus guessed that there was no need for a door. A curtain would allow more airflow. Inside, the house looked like a honeycomb, with many small alcoves and shelves in the walls. Strange things were set in the shelves, antlers from exotic animals, small skulls and beads. Jarrus couldn't even identify some. Maya looked around, curious but still uncertain. "Knock, knock," Rigel called into the house, sidestepping a shelf. A cloud of green mist swirled from the alcove directly above and in front of them, swirling into indistinct shapes. Whispering voices came from within it, voices from far away. Jarrus realized his companions had stopped, but he moved on, suddenly no longer in control of his own body. The mist filled his head, clouding it with longing and softness from the faint melody coming from nowhere. Rigel put a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Wait," he said simply. "He likes his tricks." He looked up. "The mist is a nice touch, Lamar. Did you change the melody of the song, too?" The mist swirled and blew away, as though it had been bottled up. The voice that answered was new, with a lilting accent, and came from the alcove above. "I thought so, and the song needed some spicing up, like a good stew. The Cooper was quick to succumb, at any rate." Padding down the stairs was a creature about the same size as Jarrus, but not a Cooper. His shape was almost like that of a lizard, with short back legs and a long body. His tail was thick, like a salamander's. The face was oval-shaped, with yellow eyes and a pronounced jaw. As he spoke, Jarrus could see rows of sharp teeth, tinted a faint blue. His skin was the same mottled green-gray as the swamp. A darker patch ran up his face across his eyes like a mask, giving him a roguish and mischievous look. A green frill ran around his chin, then down the back and length of the tail. "What are you?" Jarrus asked, before he could stop himself. The newcomer turned and studied him critically. "I," he said, "am a siren, though I doubt you'd have seen one of us before, Cooper." "A what?" Jarrus asked, still confused. The species was unfamiliar. Maya shook her head. "A siren, Jarrus. A shapeshifter." A siren. Suddenly the hypnotic fog and the distant song that had captured him moments before made sense. "Oh, so that was you?" he asked, motioning vaguely at the alcove. "With the mist and everything?" "Indeed it was," the siren said, looking pleased. "Though next time you might try not to fall for it as quickly as you did just now." Norin had approached from behind. "Jarrus, Maya, meet Lamar Skytooth, one of my oldest friends." "Getting older," Lamar commented with a wry smile, and he and Norin chuckled. "Then were you one of the Guardians of Gairal too?" Jarrus asked. "A guardian? Please. No, I never served with them. Supported them, spied for them, a little." The siren's green eyes glinted with the past memories. "That's a story for another time, though. I'm guessing you didn't come here for my stories." "How'd you figure that?" Jarrus asked, startled. Lamar gestured at them all with a webbed paw. "You're packed for a venture. Most likely a dangerous one, too, or you wouldn't be carrying weapons." He looked at Rigel, a little suspiciously. "Don't tell me you've a mind to go after Savicon himself." "I might tell you that," Rigel said slowly. Good, Lamar said briskly. I'm quite interested to hear what you have in mind, and I'd like to know how you finally convinced old Norrin here to challenge Saphicon again. He threw a good-natured grin at Norrin, who shook his head. Let's just say it only took Rygel's picking fights with Saphicon's soldiers about 100 times to convince me. The real story, though, is what they have to say. Norrin nodded to the Coopers. Well, tell it then, Lamar said, leading them to the table. I've just finished preparing lunch, and I'm very curious to hear your story.